Good evening.
Sir.
Very good evening. So we will start. Let's share the screen. Okay, good evening, Andy. So let's move feature. So we had surveyed the physical setting class last day, and most of the topic have been covered. Now what we have left is a couple of topics like natural vegetation, which is a small topic, soil type, and climatic regions. So I'll keep that topic for a later day. Climatic regions, we have to study stamps classifications and the basics of Köppen and a little bit of the onwards classification. Although stamp historically UPSC ചോദിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നു ബാക്കിയൊന്നും അത്രയും ചോദിച്ചിട്ടില്ല, but nevertheless നമുക്കത് ഒഴിവാക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. We'll also look into Köppen and Travato's classification. The natural vegetation is easy. We'll integrate that with resources. Resources you have an area called biotic resources and forest and wildlife resources. We'll combine it with that and we'll deal with that. So energy crisis, and my understanding is that with respect to resources, the energy resources have been dealt with and the minerals have been dealt with. That's what Binam had told me in association with the resource, what resource geography, industrial geography. I think these two topics have been dealt with. Is that right? Minerals and energy കഴിഞ്ഞാണോ? Yes. Okay, Roshan. Thank you. Yeah, fair enough. Energy crisis. What about energy crisis? I think that would also be the same thing. That have been covered. Yeah, tell me. Energy crisis. Mike on I പറഞ്ഞാൽ മതി. ചെറിയ കാര്യങ്ങളാണ്. മെസ്സേജ് ഒന്നും പ്രശ്നമില്ല. റോഷൻ എനർജി ക്രൈസിസ് പഠിപ്പിച്ചാണോ?
ഓർക്കുന്നില്ല, പക്ഷേ മിനറൽ റിസോഴ്സസ് അതെല്ലാം പഠിപ്പിച്ചു, പക്ഷെ എനർജി ക്രൈസിസ് ആയിട്ട് അങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞില്ലെന്നാണ് എൻ്റെ ഒരു ഓർമ്മ.
ഓക്കെ, സോ വിൽ സീ വാട്ട് ആർക്കെങ്കിലും അഭിപ്രായമൊന്നുമില്ല, എല്ലാവരും അങ്ങനെ തന്നെയല്ലേ വിചാരിക്കണേ? ഓക്കെ, സോ വി ഹാവ് പറഞ്ഞോളൂ.
എടുത്തിട്ടില്ലാന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു സർ.
Yeah, sure. So it's like energy and an extension. Few things can be said about the way India's vulnerability and what India can do. A basic few things can be said. So I'll look into that. So we have basically a couple of resources like land, water that is left to us. Similarly, I think biotic and marine resources, which is very small topic with respect to farming, and forest and wildlife, again a small one, and their conservation. Maybe we'll look into a few of the conservation principles. We'll probably do that along with the environmental geography, which we have to take now. So resource geography would be a small topic, and Indian geography mostly Indian geography is like GS, where you do not have much of concept as such to study. In fact, the content as such is mostly GS like. And one thing you can say is that you part of areas of agriculture of GS will be covered, industry will be covered, transport and communication will be covered, cultural setting, population, etc., social society would be covered. So in fact, when you study GS also, a huge amount of these topics would be covered. So what we do in these classes would be to look at indicatively, like what are the things that we have to study. Similarly, some of the basic important things will be covered. So we'll try to cover that. Resources will not take much time to complete. So we'll do that. And one of the most important topic is water. Water is very important. Land has recently been coming up in questions recently. So that's all. That's the thing that we have to going to see in the coming maybe one session, 1.5 session. So we'll cover that. All right. Now, the dynamicity of these topics as far as Indian geography, especially resources, is concerned is very, again, ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ഇതിനകത്ത് കാര്യമായിട്ട് കൺസെപ്റ്റുകൾ പഠിക്കാനില്ല. ഇറ്റ്സ് ഫ്യൂജ്ലി ഫാക്ച്വൽ. കുറച്ച് ഫാക്ച്വൽ കാര്യങ്ങൾ നമുക്ക് ഇതിനകത്ത് പഠിക്കാനുണ്ട്, കുറച്ച് റീസൺസ് പഠിക്കാനുണ്ട്, കുറച്ച് സൊല്യൂഷൻസ് പഠിക്കാനുണ്ട്. So that's what we have with respect to these things. So let's see what is basically resources. When we say resources, what does resources mean? On the just on the potential, what how can we define resources? There are different views about resources. We'll start with that. What are they? Yeah. Okay. പറയൂ, എന്താണ് resources? What occurs to your mind when you talk about resources? എന്താണ് മനസ്സിലേക്ക് വരുന്ന കാര്യം?
നമുക്ക് യൂസ്ഫുൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സാധാരണ ഒരു മെറ്റീരിയൽ.
Okay, so towards the concept of utility, right? Okay, so and a material which is useful to it, almost right, you can say a material which is having its own utility to people, but then it may not be necessarily material, but the utility part is true. So resources can be a thing which serves some purposes. Resources can be anything which may serve some purpose to human being. Beings of our culture, right? So that's how we can broadly define it. So this idea was given by Zimmerman, a geographer called Zimmerman. So this is the dynamic idea of resources. Dynamic idea of resources. This means more than the things that we said here is that the most important fact here would be the purpose. What purpose can it serve? So that means what resources need not be. One more thing is that human satisfaction. Something has to bring about human satisfaction. Then it could be considered as a resource. So a resource something which served a huge resource potential, like maybe you look at firewood, which was one of the most critical resources in the earlier period, is not anymore a resource in the firewood sense. Wood may be a resource for lumbering, furniture making, so things like that, but not for energy. Wood is not a resource for energy these days, but something which have not received much of attention, like petroleum, or even if you go a little bit more back, like coal has served more purposes. Petroleum hasn't really served any purposes in human civilization history, but for the last 100 or 200 years. So that has become a very important resource. So the idea is that dynamicity means what resource, and it's what is a resource will be hugely dependent upon its on the technology, or what depends on this technology, which will depend on socio-economic conditions. It should again depend upon the socio-economic conditions of the civilization, or the society which you are dealing with. So basically resources could be anything. So if you look at again helium or hydrogen, these are not considered resources today, or maybe 10 years back, which was not considered a huge resource, but is increasingly becoming a resource. Like hydrogen is increasingly becoming a resource as the day goes. Hydrogen fuel cells, hydrogen batteries, things like that. Okay, so hydrogen is becoming a huge resource. Nuclear fusion is being talked about. So resources are a very dynamic concept. Now, they are very human-centric concept. Now, along with that, resources have always been, talked about in the sense that resource management has been, or the access or lack of access to resources have been a major concern with respect to the human civilization. So we are just defining, going through the foundational basis of resources, what we see as resources, before we go into these things. So we need to have a conceptual understanding, or also we need to integrate the different thing that we have studied already. Okay. Now, access to lack of resources has been a major concern. Now, could you please tell me like some of the viewpoints about resources which we have already studied? Resources viewpoints, so we can say resources can be viewed from a three perspective as to what resources can be and the nature of resources. Any idea? Just giving a foundational arguments. എങ്ങനെയാണ് റിസോഴ്സിനെ കാണാൻ പറ്റുന്ന 3 ഐഡിയാസ് ഉണ്ട്. നമ്മൾ നമ്മുടെ മോഡൽസ് ആൻഡ് തിയറീസ് നമ്മൾ ഒരാളെ കുറിച്ച് പഠിച്ചായിരുന്നല്ലോ, who talked about resources. In fact, we kind of talked about 2 people who talked about resources, who again talked about resources. Who are they? Any idea? Excuse me. Okay, let's see. Let me give you like 3 point of view can be looked at. That is the Malthusian point of view.
സാർ മ്യൂട്ടാണ്, കേൾക്കത്തില്ല.
Let's stop that, right? Okay. Okay. So there are 3 perspectives as to what a resources is. Now, I'll just give you the brief of all these 3 resources, 3 perspectives. That is, first one is Malthusian point of view, which one says that population and resource balance. Basically, it talks about that, and it says that resources are finite. Resources does not increase, with the rate of increase of population. Meaning what? Resources are static view of resources. Resources are limited and static, does not evolve. So obviously, you can say when the nature of resources in Malthusian view is that time passes, resources declines. Now, the second view is the cornucopian view, cornucopian or a technocentric view, you can say. This one says that with increase in technology, resources also increases. Okay, so there is no, there need not be any fear about the finiteness of resources. Resources, in fact, would be increasing. So we can put somebody else also here, limits to growth. They also proposed this similar theory, limits to growth theory. Now, the next one is the Marxian view. So cornucopian view means that resources will, all these are in relation with population also. So if you look at cornucopian view, they says that Malthus says that population കൂടുന്നു, resources കുറയുന്നു. And cornucopian will say that resources എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് population കൂടുമ്പോൾ കുറയുന്നുണ്ട്, ശരിയാണ്. പക്ഷേ ആ ഒരു കുറവുണ്ടാകുമ്പോൾ there would be increasing demand for more and more product. This demand will lead to, so if you like population increases will lead to demand increase. Demand increase will lead to more R&D. R&D will lead to more tech development. And tech development in turn will again lead to population, which again will lead to demand. So this is the cycle of technological development, which has been proved true in a capitalistic setup. Okay, so that can be seen there. Now they are talking about all about technology. Technology will solve the problem. Marxian perspective is that Marxian perspective says that again resource availability is a function of affluence. The more affluent will society will be able to utilize maximum resources, and the poor would be facing deprivation. So a third perspective, meaning what? Population, എത്ര population ഉണ്ടെന്നുള്ളതല്ല, എത്ര resource ഉണ്ടെന്നുള്ളതല്ല, എത്ര ടെക്നോളജിക്ക് ഉണ്ട്, എത്ര ടെക്നോളജിക്ക് എത്ര റിസോഴ്സസ് പ്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും എന്നുള്ളത് മാത്രമല്ല, a third perspective of affluence is begun by the Marxian perspective. കാരണം നമുക്ക് എത്രത്തോളം കപ്പാസിറ്റി ഉണ്ട് ഇത് അക്വയർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും, അതനുസരിച്ചായിരിക്കും റിസോഴ്സ് അവൈലബിലിറ്റി ഡിപ്പെൻഡ് ചെയ്യുക. സോ anyhow we can safely say resources are a dynamic concept. Now this same concept can again be used for environmental concerns, population studies. I think I don't know if you are familiar with the concept yet, or seen this this mode of interpretation of interpretation kandarunno of resources, or the point of view about resources. No, I guess. Okay, so this is how you should understand resources, and we can also use the same purpose for environmental and population studies. So environmental, if you look at environmental degradation, is a function of population or explosion. It's a function of poor technological development. It can also be a function of affluence, where some of the countries like US and the European countries have been a very carbon how huge carbon footprint. They rely on carbon things, whereas countries like the developing world has less affluence and less emission of greenhouse gases. So that is the perspective we are working on here. We'll just write that a few points. So whenever you have questions on the resource front, if I draw that diagram again, one view is the Marxian view, the Malthusian view, the other view is the cornucopian view, where technology, where resources would be dynamic and would be increasing statically. Resources time. All right, so we subscribe to this point of view, and in between somewhere you have the sustainability concept, whereby we have to maintain that sustainable production of resources. All right, so that's what theoretical framework you need to understand. Okay, so what is resources? We'll start with the idea of what are resources, or what is resources. Resources is a wider term which has been used in resources is a wider term which have been used in different or variable senses. In general, it is understood as something. In general, it is understood as something which fulfills or satisfies human needs, and thus has a utility for humans. In fact, according to Zimmerman, okay. In fact, according to Zimmerman, the term resource does not refer to a thing or a substance. Does not refer to a thing or a substance but a function which a thing or substance may perform. Substance may perform, or to an operation in which it may take part. In fact, man is the most important and integral part of resources. In fact, man is the most important and integral part of resources. As he lies at the center, as he lies at the hierarchy of resource consumption. Only satisfaction of human being can convert. Only satisfaction of human being can convert anything into a resources. And thus simply saying anything into a resources. Thus the resource is a human-centric concept. Thus resource is a human-centric concept. The term resource is different from wealth. The term resource is different from wealth. Later consists of the wealth consists of all potential and exchangeable means of the later consist of. So resource നമ്മൾ പൊതുവെ കുറച്ചൊരു എന്താ പറയുക കൺസെപ്റ്റ് ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ വരുന്നതാണ്. ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ കൺസ്യൂമറിസത്തെ കുറിച്ച് ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, കൺസ്യൂമറിസം ക്യാപിറ്റലിസത്തെ കുറിച്ച് ചോദ്യം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. സോ വി ക്യാൻ യൂസ് ദീസ് ഐഡിയാസ് there. So later consists of all potential and exchangeable means of satisfying human wants. It is a tangible object which has.
Sir,
Yeah.
the term resources is different from wealth. അത് തൊട്ടങ്ങ് പറയാമോ?
Okay. The latter, that is wealth. Latter consists of all potential and exchangeable means of satisfying human wants. It is a tangible object which has function as well as utility, like a resource. However, resource is a wider term. Resource is a wider term which can be tangible or intangible. And in fact, the utility of resources are intransferable, unlike that of wealth. Only its value can be exchanged. Okay, I was just adding that. In fact, utility of resources are transferable, unlike that of wealth. So wealth can be exchanged like money, property, etc. But resource has a particular function that it performs utility. That's not transferred. Every resource has its own utility or role that is played. Only its value can be exchanged in the form of money or other forms of wealth. The term resource involves initial resistance. which things and substances would these resources involve initial resistance, which things and substances would prevent themselves from getting converted to a resource, which things or substances would present before getting converted to a resources. This resistance is overcome by this resources is overcome by development of technology, development of technology. Once technology is developed, objects and things can be used to satisfy human wants. Once technology is developed, objects and things can be utilized, can be used to satisfy human wants. And the technology is, and the technological capability is a function of the socio-economical progress of a society. Thus, it can be next paragraph. Thus, it can be argued that resources are dynamic. Resources are dynamic, unlike the static views adopted by sources are dynamic, unlike the static views adopted by Malthusine and Neo-Malthusian thinkers. Malthusine and Neo-Malthusian thinkers, because since the development of resources is a function of human thinking. Okay, now you just write this perspective also. I think paragraph but this will save our time. The Malthusian perspective, the Malthusian point of view sees resources as a static or a finite resources. Okay. Maybe you can write like Malthusian point of view. In Malthusian point of view, resources have a static nature and which act as limits to growth. When population increases, the availability of resources decreases. But the dynamic view propagated by cornucopians view resources as a dynamic one which undergoes quantum jumps with the development of technology. And with technological development, resource availability increases leaps and bounds. On the other hand, Marxian point of view argues that resource availability is a function of distribution and redistribution. That is affluence. Meaning, affluence means what? Access to resources. The ratio of access to the ratio of access to resources. In an affluent society, an affluent section of the population would be able to utilize maximum resources, whereas the poor segment of society would be facing deprivation due to lack of resources. So you can take the example of inequality in different countries. Maybe you can take the example of India, where there is the ultra rich people, 1% of the ultra rich, and the majority of the poor people. Maybe you can take the example of north-south divide, where resource-rich countries, even resource-rich countries like maybe Venezuela, is struggling from hyperinflation, famine, things like that. Yemen is facing the same situation. Africa, with its huge resource base, still is suffering. So affluence is there. The affluent people would be able to rally up more resources, and not so affluent people will not be able to do that. Okay, so that's the one perspective. Now, just if you look at the classification of the resources, that's a basic thing. So it's not exam perspective, but just classifying it on the basis of genetic basis. Genetic basis, the resources can be classified into simple thing, biotic and abiotic things. So we'll be going in this perspective. Similarly, there is the durability perspective of the resources, which obviously is the conventional and renewable and non-renewable resources. So this durability is a function where, like, all the debate of sustainability comes in. How renewable the resources are, how much not renewable the resources are. Then there is also the debate of locational aspect. That is ubiquitous resources and the localized resources. So if you look at some of the, so you might have read about the semiconductor issues that India is facing. So again, if you look at rare earth minerals, just giving an example, rare earth minerals are mostly found in China. It used to be in Japan, but currently the market is dominated by China. So that localization of resources is giving is causing trouble in the world. So China is having almost 90% control over a strategic mineral, that is rare earth minerals, which are used for all kind of electronic industries, utilities. So that is the durability factor would be coming in. So these all are what you call as elements of resource crisis. Okay, so that's why the classification has been given. Genetic has not lot to do with the resource crisis question or the energy crisis question, but the durability is a key aspect and the locational aspect. So whenever you're talking about resource crisis, it involves a few things like availability, accessibility, and then affordability. And now one more thing is there, that is sustainability. So if you look at any of these resources, you will be able to judge these from its own perspective. Now, say petroleum, and then you will be able to come to the argument that why energy crisis is there. So if you look at petroleum, on the availability front, India has very limited supply and dependent on foreign agencies. So there is a energy crisis as far as India is concerned. So accessibility. Accessibility is not a big issue because we have pumps and networks all around the world. But I will give you the example of the rural poor who are till now using firewoods. Right. So in that context, you can say the Ujjwala Yojana. Ujjwala Yojana is reducing the accessibility issues, but there are still different parts of the world. If you look at the African part, if you look at some parts of Latin America, where you have still no accessibility to clean and clean air, clean fuel. So accessibility is one issue. Again, energy crisis, India still has that issue. We cannot say India has eradicated that issue. We still have the accessibility issue, and obviously affordability issue is like it's clear to like day and night. Basically, even in Ujjwala, refilling it's a major issue. Now, this energy crisis obviously will be leading to what all kind of issues, mostly the indoor pollution, the gender issues, like women are at the worst receiving end of these issues. So I'm just demonstrating you how energy crisis will unfold, and you can look at this through almost for every resources through these 4 perspective. Similarly, petroleum sustainability in countries which have accessibility, affordability, and availability, still the sustainability question is making the petroleum resources a question number 1. So the green how green how green the resources are, that's a major question that is significant these days. How green എന്നുള്ളതും resource crisis-ലേക്കാണ്. So coal is not sustainable, and coal use is being reduced despite we have large amount of coal coal availability. So that's the way you should be looking at resource crisis. Now, the similar thing can be said about water. How much available is water? India water availability is decreasing. Accessible. Most of a large amount of the urban population, the slum population, is unable to access clean and safe drinking water. Sometimes the price of drinking water is increasing very much. If you look at some of the urban areas in India where water crisis is extreme, like Bangalore, running out of water, people have to use tankers to fill water in. Again, an issue. Sustainability. The mode of extraction and the resource intensivity is making it unsustainable. For example, flood irrigation in agriculture, making the water utilization unsustainable. It is degrading the land. So for any resource, you can look into energy crisis from this perspective. So I've given you the baseline perspective of how to look at these things. Obviously, you can look into it from the Marxian, cornucopian, and the Malthusian perspective too. Okay, so മനസ്സിലായോ? ഞാൻ 2 examples demonstrate ചെയ്തു. Then now what we need only is like few data for that. Availability, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability. A few data is required, then you can construct a good argument. And obviously, you may have to need little solutions to that. Okay, yeah. Did you get what I was saying? Understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so keep this framework in mind always. Okay, now we have crisis. The resource is dynamic, but although when we, again, these are perspective, resources is mostly understood to be dynamic, but how dynamic? That's where the question of limits to growth has come up. Is it infinitely dynamic? And people said no, there are certain limits to growth. Now, limits to growth theory, so I'm not going into this detail. So that perspective also needs to be kept in mind when you say about the cornucopian, the Marxian, and the Malthusian perspective. Now, what that is there? Now, limits to growth makes us think this Chaltai attitude, or as in whatever happens, like the attitude is not right enough. We need to do something about resources if you have to make it sustainable. If you have to enjoy it in a sustainable manner. So I think I hope you written this down. Dictate whenever few things are there, I'll dictate. So you can remember this framework: resource crisis or energy crisis, for that matter. Energy or resource. It's a function of these 4 elements: availability of resources, accessibility of resources, affordability is the economic term, accessibility is the geographic. These 2 are the locational aspect, and which is the environmental aspect. Fair enough. And give an example also. Petrol is in the example. Okay, so Angel has written it down. I hope the rest of you also did that. Okay. Now, I was talking about, like, there is some limits to growth. You cannot be living the resource exploitation to like in an unregulated manner. So there comes the idea of resource management. Now, if you asked questions previously about resource management, there are a few perspectives to the idea of resource management. That is harmony between harmony in relation between man and nature, harmony in man and nature relationship, ensuring sustainable and equitable access to generations to come, the next generation, and what do you call steps for regulation to ensure these things. So these three are the dimensions in which we can achieve resource management. So we'll just write a few points on that, how we can achieve resource management or the concept of resource management. Okay. There are two basic concepts in resource management, basically. The first one is the exploitation of resources should be in such a manner that, first one, the exploitation of resources should be in such a manner that harmonious relationship between man and nature is not disturbed. So do you know about the technocentric view and the ecocentric view? What do we say? Do we know that? Okay. So there are two perspectives with respect to how we can manage our resources. The first one, so resource management has two perspectives. For resource management, environmental management, climate change management, all these can be viewed from these two perspectives. So resource management. The first one is a first one, or the two of them is ethnocentric and technocentric view. Now, ecocentric view consists of whereby main focus is on environment. So we need to adjust ourselves to the we need to adjust ourselves, our living styles to make it sustainable and prevent the ecological degradation. So human actions need to be changed. So there are two perspectives. One is interventionist, or sometimes called as the communist perspective. Then they house the accommodative perspective. Okay, so the interventionist perspective is talking about radical changes to the production system. So it is basically communist perspective. Communist perspective in the sense that not about communist party, but it is talking about replacing centralized or mass production system with a community oriented system, or replacement of capitalism. In that sense, we can say it's communist as we understand. So it is talking about the capitalist system of production where mass production is done at the cost of environment needs to be replaced. So that is interventionist school. Now the accommodative school says that it is not advocating for what you call as dismantlement of the capitalist system, but for changes. Okay. There's been a mistake. Okay, I did change this. Sorry. This should come under these two are. That is what I was thinking about. Just I interchange these two. So this is a technocentric view we are talking about. The names have changed. So what I was talking about, this radical approach. Okay, sorry, I should take it this way. Okay, this radical approach which I was talking about is the Gaianist approach. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. Okay. So the communist attempt. That is basically looking at the radical dismemberment of the current system. Now there is a point of view that is the Gaianist approach, which is talking about more eco-friendly living. That is not again not based on complete disrespect of the disruption of the capitalist system, but to make amends. Like and the resource exploitative system as such we see cannot be practiced this way. We need to make changes. Now there are two other systems with technocentric perspective. Now the technocentric perspective is speaking about what? Technology focus in the sense that focused. Tech would be the solution for technology for solution to environmental degradation. Again, the cornucopian perspective, you are looking at technology as a solution. Now, accommodation will be talking about greener technologies or greening the what do you call as the climate or the environmental challenges, finding greener solutions. That are the issues that we face, like maybe the reduction of the carbon emission reduction, the carbon neutrality, all these things. That comes under the accommodation perspective. So we are trying to accommodate few things for the environment. Now, then comes the interventionist school. Interventionist school does not believe in basically accommodation or see this eco-friendly school. Often they reject such as from their perspective, there were new technological solutions to the environmental question. So they will talk about what maybe synthetic plants. They'll talk about mirrors in the atmosphere so as to scatter, sending aerosols into the atmosphere so as to reflect sunlight and reduce global warming. They talk about artificial farming, hydroponics, aquaponics. So if climate change happens, no problem. We'll look for other reasons. So they'll talk about finding new energy sources like hydrogen, helium, new kind of energy sources. So these kind of perspectives are there. So all these are trying to bring about harmony between environment and man. So, but how they see that harmony, how to achieve them would be varying different. So the interventionist school are often on the one end, the technological end of the spectrum, whereas the communist or the Gaianist communist school would be the other spectrum, where you have to basically go back to the pre-industrial revolution stages. Communists are, where Gaianists are accommodating for more eco-friendly perspective. So that's the way in which this debate has about resource management is panned out. There are different point of view, but broadly നമുക്ക് ഈ പല point of views നെ ഈ ഒരു 4 headset അകത്തേക്ക് accommodate ചെയ്യാം. Okay. Now that second one, that is the sustainability angle. Resource management should also take care of resource management should also take care of all the humanity, as the natural resources are the property of entire civilizations. As natural resources are the property of entire civilization. Special care must be taken Special care must be taken so that there is equitable distribution of resources. Special care must be taken so as to so that there is equitable distribution of resources. Such an equitable distribution. So equitable resource distribution would mean what? Between different areas, between the different class of people in the currently living population. So between Africa and Europe, maybe you can say between the developed and the developing world, you can say between the rich or the haves and the have-nots, you can say. So that is equitable distribution of resources. It does also mean intergenerational equity. So such an equitable distribution should also take into account such an equitable distribution should also take into account the intergenerational equity, take into account the intergenerational equity and sustainability of the resources. Intergenerational equity and sustainability of the resources. Okay, few things as to how resource steps for resource management. Few steps can be mentioned. Few steps can be made. There's a couple of steps in which we can achieve resource management. So they are: first one, assessment and inventorizing. Assessment and simplifying it, making inventory of the resources. Assessment and making the inventory of resources. Making inventory of resources. So you have to basically know how much of resources is there. So that we would see like the amount of coal that is available, potential resources available, or potential resources available without hurting the environment. So assessment is the first step. Second step is classification of resources. Classification of resources on the basis of their availability. Then suitable policy should be formulated for their management. That would include increasing efficiency, reducing wastage, and searching for alternative sources. So a suitable policy for the management should compose of these three elements to achieve the targets of resource management. Then fourth one, ensuring financial resources for ensuring dedicated corpus of financial resources for resource management. So that is what we see as the climate fund, global environment facility. Okay, these are like CAMPA in the case of India. Maybe one example I can remember is CAMPA, compensatory afforestation and forest management practices or fund or act. CAMPA fund, CAMPA act. So ensuring dedicated financial resources. And the last one is that cooperation between domestic and international authorities, as well as between government and civil society. So these much of steps are required in order to say achieve resource management effectively. Okay, so that's the theoretical part of it. Now, as far as India is concerned, okay, this is it. So this can be applied. This framework can be applied for any resources. For example, land as a resources. That's what we are going to study just now. So land resources and the management resources, you need to basically have a proper assessment of how much of land resources we have and how much is basically available. If you talk about that, you need to classify them then. Okay, how much of land is available for what all purposes? For agriculture, how much is available? For forest, how much is available? Or how much is needed? We can also available in the sense that you can also classify them to be the what is the proportion in which you are going to divide that. Then you have to build a suitable policy. National forest policy would be there. There should be similarly there should be land use policy on a larger one. Maybe there should be an agricultural land use policy. Maybe there should be an industrial land use policy. So the suitable policy would be there, which is focused on efficiency, achieving optimal utilization of land use. Which will feel like we would look like agricultural land, industrial use, പരമാവധി കുറച്ച് ഉപയോഗിക്കുക, agriculture ലാൻഡിന്റെ വേസ്റ്റേജ് കുറയ്ക്കുക, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വേസ്റ്റ് ലാൻഡ് ഡീഗ്രഡേഷൻ കുറയ്ക്കുക, ഓൾട്ടർനേറ്റീവ് സോഴ്സ് ഓഫ് ലാൻഡിന് പകരം, ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ അഗ്രികൾച്ചറിനാണെങ്കിൽ ഓൾട്ടർനേറ്റീവ് സോഴ്സസ് ഹൈഡ്രോപോണിക്സ് അക്വപോണിക്സ് പോലുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളിലേക്ക് നോക്കുക. ഫിനാൻഷ്യൽ റിസോഴ്സസ് ലാൻഡ് മാനേജ്മെന്റിന്, ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ കനീഷ് കല്യാൺ യോജന എന്താണ് സംഭവം? Wherever you have mining and mining related land degradation and other issues, you have the Kanish Kalyan Yojana, that's a dedicated fund that you are giving to manage that area. Similarly, you have the REDD plus and fund transfer, which is focused on forest management. So you are developing a corpus of fund so that proper land utilization can be achieved. Now, cooperation between international and domestic agencies, between government and സിവിൽ സൊസൈറ്റി അഗെയിൻ നമുക്കറിയാം അല്ലെ. ഇപ്പോ ഡൊമസ്റ്റിക് നോക്കുവാണെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ത്യക്ക് ക്ലൈമറ്റ് ആക്ഷൻ പ്ലാൻ ഉണ്ട്, 6-8 സബ് പ്ലാൻസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ഹിമാലയൻ പ്രൊജക്ട്, വാട്ടർ പ്രൊജക്ട്, ഓക്കെ പ്രൊജക്ട്, solar energy projects. So different type of projects are there. Now that is not between domestic government but between the international community also. The Paris climate change deal, the Paris deal, the Montreal protocol. So all these things are there. So for any ലാൻഡിന്റെ കാര്യം എടുക്കാമെങ്കിൽ ഒബ്വിയസ്ലി ലാൻഡ് ഡ്യൂറേഷൻ ന്യൂട്രാലിറ്റി എന്നൊരു ടാർഗറ്റ് ഉണ്ട്, UNCCD ഉണ്ട് ഡെസർട്ടിഫിക്കേഷൻ പ്രിവെന്റ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള. സോ ഫോർ എവറി സച്ച് റിസോഴ്സസ് യു നീഡ് ദീസ്. അതാണ് റിസോഴ്സ് മാനേജ്മെന്റ് ഫ്രെയിംവർക്ക്. ദിസ് റിസോഴ്സ് മാനേജ്മെന്റ് ഫ്രെയിംവർക്ക് ഷുഡ് ബി ദർ. ആൻഡ് ഇത് നമുക്ക് ആൻസർ എഴുതുമ്പോഴും എഫക്റ്റീവ് ആയിട്ട് യൂസ് ചെയ്യാം. വെൻ യു ആർ ഗിവിംഗ് എ വേ ഫോർവേഡ്, യു ക്യാൻ കീപ് ദിസ് ഫ്രെയിംവർക്ക് ഇൻ യുവർ മൈൻഡ് ടു generate points. Okay, having said that, we need to move into land as a resource. Land as a resource. How much important a resource is land? Now, if you look at the case of India, we'll briefly go about this one. We don't have to go into too much detail. It's kind of, again, as I said, it's a factual area. So how much is the area of India?
2.7% of air land mass.
കേട്ടില്ല.
2.7 6 എന്നറിയത്തില്ല, അത്രയും പെർസെന്റേജ് ആണെന്ന് അറിയത്തില്ല. മൊത്തം സൈസ് അറിയത്തില്ല, സ്ക്വയർ കിലോമീറ്റർ കണക്കറിയത്തില്ല.
Okay, so we can basically say about India has about 17% of the population of the world and about 2.5% of land area. Okay, about 3.28 million hectare area is there, if you are going by area wise data. So again, this number can be remembered. So which India has like there is a mismatch between the available land area and the requirement for land in case of India. So something we need to look at is what we need. Sustainable land utilization, it's a very necessary. One thing that is pro for India is advantages for India is that what do you want? India about 40% plus area is habitable or arable. 40% area is arable land. That is, it is good land which is worth agriculture, doing agriculture. It is good for living. Now this is not the same in the case of every other country in the world. Sometimes most of the countries have less than 40%, maybe 30%, 20% arable land. And for Canada, Russia, you have very huge area but very limited arable land. China, if you look at China, arable land is very limited. Mostly the people live, the suitable land is found in the eastern coast of China. India, it is kind of mostly spread about. കുറച്ചൊരു ഹിമാലയൻ ഏരിയയും കുറച്ചൊരു desert area നോക്കി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ബാക്കി almost all regions are well inhabited. So leaving that, as far as India's land as a resource is concerned, it's a critical resource. Land is significant for everything, for agriculture, for animal husbandry. Now, with respect to the more consciousness that we have, this is an important resource with respect to forest cover, carbon sink, etc. Similarly, it's very necessary for industrial purpose. Similarly, it's very necessary for settlement purpose. Okay, so the land and the area of the land is very critical as far as the land utilization of the country is concerned. So basically, land as a resource and land utilization management, it talks about efficient use of land across different categories. There are 8 categories in which the government of India identifies land use in India. Some of the most important ones are the net zone area, the forested area. Okay. Similarly, other areas like industrial land use, pasture lands, etc. So these are the non-agricultural land use area. So several fallow land area. So that is classified in 8 categories. We'll just see some of the most important categorizations. So what after independence, we have seen a trend where most of the land use area was seen towards 2 purposes. That is developing the NSA, enlarging the NSA region, and into industrialization, and some regions forest area has developed. So we have to know basically the percentage area that were occupied by different categories of land use. Now NSA, net zone area, areas where total cultivation is conducted. That is, one is 41% for what 41% of NSA area was there in 1950. That has been increased to 46% in 2011. So NSA has certainly increased at the cost of several areas like forested area. Forested area has also increased from 14%. It has increased to about 22%. Non-agricultural land use has also seen huge increase from 30% to 8.6% growth has been from. Yeah. Okay, I thought like NSA was taught. Net zone area. What is net zone area? The total cropped area of a region, of a country. So 41% of or 46% of the land of India is under cultivation. Net zone area, NSA. Now there is GSA, gross zone area. എന്താണ് വ്യത്യാസം? എന്താ വ്യത്യാസമുള്ള?
Total available now.
Net zone area is the total available one. GSA is different. Say net zone area is the total available land in India for cultivation. Now GSA, sometimes 1 crop would be cultivated, sometimes 2 crops will be cultivated, sometimes 3 crops will be cultivated. So NSA refers to just the land area available. പക്ഷെ എത്ര ക്രോപ്പ് ഇറക്കി എന്നുള്ളത് നമുക്കറിയുന്നില്ല. ആ എത്ര ക്രോപ്പ് ഇറക്കി എന്നുള്ളതിന്റെ കൂടെ അക്കൗണ്ടിങ് ആണ് GSA. So India's GSA is somewhere about 190 million hectare. This one is about 146 million hectare. So GSA is a concept. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് irrigated സ്ഥലത്താണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് കൂടുതൽ ക്രോപ്സ് വളർത്താം. That's the concept of GSA. Total cropped area within an year. Whereas NSA is the total cropped area with respect to multiple cropping stages, like maybe Kharif, Rabi. So that's the difference. I think it's clear now.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So okay. So non-agricultural land use is mostly the industrial land use and the settlement land use. So these 3 have seen large increase in the case of India. But other areas, others are mostly declined. So others were 40% earlier. Now it has become to 22%. We'll see that. But mostly we can see these three regions have seen huge increase after the 1950s, or maybe when you're saying about, when you're talking about independence, after independence, these three regions, NSA, non-agricultural land use, and forest areas have seen rise, and other areas basically decrease. In other areas, പല കാര്യങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഒന്ന് wasteland, ഒന്ന് fallow land, which is like the land where maybe one cropping is 1 year cropping is done, the next year is left behind. Maybe the pasture land, all these have declined. So this has been the pattern of land use in India. So we'll have to just see few of these areas how it has increased, and what was the reason for that. Maybe mostly with respect to the net zone area. Okay, so this land use pattern is important. We have to maintain a balance. For example, when the pastures and grassland are decreasing, what will happen? The amount of land available for grazing will decline, and more grazing will be done in less area of land. And then what will happen? The livestock will eat too much of grass, and the grass cow will be removed. That will then lead to desertification and land degradation. So one of the most important reasons for land degradation and desertification in India is the disproportionate availability of grasslands or pasture lands with respect to the livestock population of India, among other reasons. We'll come to that. Okay. So write a few things, very few things. The total area of the country is equal to 328 million hectare, and available land is equal to 300 million hectare. 306 ആണ്, 300. So that is the total available land as far as India is concerned, because obviously of the Kashmir issue, we have less land available for practical purposes. Now, next zone area account for about 46% of area. That comes about 140 million hectares. That has obviously seen an increase. Now, why this increase has happened? We'll give a couple of reasons. Reasons for increase in net zone area. What are the reasons? Just write down. Extension of irrigation facilities. First reason is extension of irrigation facilities. Irrigation facility extension would obviously make more land cultivable. Earlier, for example, if we have often talked about the Sri Gangana district, right? This was not a cultivable area, wasteland. It was later converted to net zone area. So that you can mention. Land Ceiling Act, or we can maybe mostly mention land reforms in the form of Land Ceiling Act and transfer of surplus land to landless laborers. Okay. Following Land Ceiling Act, owners were forced their land to be confiscated by state, due to which they cleared their land tree cover and started on cultivation. Land Ceiling Act in a major portion of the Land Ceiling Act, സ്വയം കൃഷി ചെയ്യുന്ന മേഖല was able to be kept under, could have been kept under our, the particular landholders control, maybe the landlords, the zamindars control. So in order to qualify for that, large areas of land tree cover has been converted into agricultural land. So that is one reason. Then we can obviously say the spread of green revolution. That has allowed more land to be cleared, more forest to be cleared for agriculture purpose. Right. That is again another point we can mention. Surplus land, transfer of surplus land to tillers or landless laborers will mean what? നേരത്തെ ഒരു ലാൻഡ് ലോഡ് ആയിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ അയാൾക്ക് അത്ര ആഗ്രഹം കാണത്തില്ല എല്ലായിടത്തും കൃഷി ചെയ്യാൻ. But the landless laborer who got waste lands, നമുക്ക് ടൈറ്റിൽ ട്രാൻസ്ഫറിന്റെ പ്രധാന ലാൻഡ് റിഫോംസിന്റെ പ്രധാന പ്രശ്നമായിരുന്നു ലാൻഡ്ലെസ് ലേബറിന് കൊടുക്കുന്ന സ്ഥലം മജോറിറ്റിയും വേസ്റ്റ് ലാൻഡ് ആയിരുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കൊള്ളത്തില്ലാത്ത ലോവർ ക്വാളിറ്റി ലാൻഡ് ആയിരുന്നു. But since they have nothing more available, they started cultivating in these lands. So, which was not earlier agricultural land was being converted into what agricultural land. So that's another reason. Okay. So we can also write a few points about gross zone area. These factual things are difficult to remember. So I'll just dictate for you. What is gross zone area? Gross zone area refers to total area. Gross zone area refers to total area which has been cultivated in a year, including multi-crop area. Multi-crop area. In 2010-11, it was 200 million hectares, the gross zone area of India. About 60 million hectare was found to be under multi-cropping. Okay. GSA was found to be the highest in states of GSA was found to be highest in the states of northern plains, Punjab, Haryana, UP, Bihar, and the coastal plains. GSA was found to be the highest in the coastal plains and the northern plains. Area under forest cover. Next important one. That has increased from 14% to about 23%, right? So our our target is what 33% of forest cover national average need to be achieved, which will be contributed on the higher end by hilly areas, and plain areas will be expected to have only lesser amount of forest cover. So much of the increase has come from increase in assessment or reporting area. Besides that, government efforts have also yielded results by means like conservation reserves, through measures like network of conservation reserves, social forestry programs, etc. So that's how the forest area. So there is like the national forest policy is also can be mentioned. National forest policy mandates 33% or 1/3 of land area to be under forest cover. Then the next one is land not utilized for agriculture. Under this category, so we'll be also able to look into that details, figures in more detail. So we'll just cover it so that it becomes easy for you. Under this land is not put to agricultural use. Settlement, urban centers, road construction, use land. It's not put to agricultural use as it may be occupied by settlements, roads, railways, or could be underwater. Or could be underwater. Barren land is also put under this category. as it cannot be utilized due to the topographic constraints of mountains and hills. As it cannot be utilized due to the topographic constraints of see, obviously this is expected, like the land under non-agricultural land use would be increasing because the urbanization increasing, more construction activities are happening. So barren land has not increased much, but non-agricultural land use in the form of the other settlement patterns have steadily increased. Okay, so these are like couple of main observations I would like to make. Baki, you can just go through the different classifications of land use areas. For example, there is land under tree and grove. There is cultivable wasteland, because the cultivable wasteland are areas uh, where you see the land can be converted. It's not wasteland or barren land completely, but land can be converted into productive land use. Then there is fallow land. Fallow land is when maybe uh, for 1 year, for no agricultural practices carried out, and the field is left. So when you are counting, every year there would be certain land which is agricultural land, but which is not used every year. So that is there. Okay, so our major concern is not these. You can look into that figure. It is given in what you call as the routine textbooks, like the Fuller. Just go through it. No need to by heart everything. Just understand. As I said, a couple of things need to be understand. That is, NSA has increased, forest area has increased, non-agri land use has increased, and then pastures and grassland has declined. So these much of things can be understood, and it is most utilizable when it comes to other topics. Now, our major issue is the problems of land use in India. That is our major concern. We have to focus on this. So this can be a few points can be discussed here. First one could be the low per capita availability of land. So this is a major issue because as we discussed earlier, 18 or 17% of the population and about 2.5% of the land area. That is a very skewed manner in which the resource is distributed. So that's an issue that can be explained. It will be explained. I'll explain it. Dictate a few things, but then unregulated and haphazard land use pattern or changes. Mostly, you see there is not much of land use planning in India. For example, wetlands would be converted into the wetlands would be converted into residential plots, settlement regions, or agricultural lands for that matter. Agricultural lands would be then converted into other purpose, which is done without looking into its sustainable utility. Okay, then another problem is the stagnation of net zone area. The net zone area is stagnant, but the population is increasing. So there is a food crisis. Also, there is decline in fertility of the soil. Soil fertility is declined. That is again a threat to food security. Okay, and then the threat of climate change, land degradation, and desertification. There are few such problems which require urgent attention from the government and the policy making apparatus. So we'll write a couple of few of them. We just mentioned the most importance of a few problems. We'll write a few. First one, problems. There has been a general decline in in per capita land availability, which has declined from 0.8 hectare per capita to per capita in 1995. Declined to 0.25 hectare per capita in 2011. It is expected that by 2030, it is expected that by 2030, India will become the most populous country in the world, which will again put immense pressure on the scarce land resources in the country. Second point, unregulated changes in the land use, unregulated changes in land use has caused major problems in the country, and unregulated changes in the land use has caused major problems in the country. Two examples can be cited. Most of the increase in NSA, came at the expense of grazing and fallow land. Also, areas under non-agricultural land use comes at the expense of agricultural land and forest land. If you are going for a industrialization in Jharkhand, basically cutting down the forest area. So on the one hand, it's the forest areas to be protected, but on the other hand, you need developmental aspirations. So you have this environment vs development situation. That's an issue. Net zone area has been stagnant since the 1970s. Net zone area has been stagnant at about 140 million hectares since 1970s. It is and has become a concern, with increasing population size. That became a concern with increasing population size, which act as a threat to food security of the country. Along with that, declining fertility of the soil. Due to faulty agricultural practices. Declining fertility of the soil due to faulty agricultural practices. Has also worsened the situation. So you know about Punjab, where desertification is happening because of salinity and alkalization. Similar issues are there in the green revolution belt across the country. Maybe it's in the Kaveri basin, maybe it's in the Gangetic basin. So everywhere you see this issue where faulty agriculture practice. Also you see soil erosion, landslides happening in the hilly regions. Maharashtra, you see a lot of soil erosion happening. So these issues are again put questions on India's land use policy. Similarly, another point, intensive cropping on marginal lands has turned them into unproductive wastelands. Although next point, although India has the second largest population of cattle, although India has the second largest population of cattle in the world, the availability of pasture lands has seen a steady decline. The availability of pasture land has declined, has seen a steady decline due to overgrazing. Overgrazing. Similarly, 7th point. Similarly, there have been a problem in the protection of ecoregions. Similarly, there has been a problem in the protection of ecoregions and ecosystem services. Despite the aim of 33% of forest land use, forest area, despite the national forest policy, despite the aim of 33% of forest area under national forest policy, the increase in forest area has been largely insignificant since 1970s. Primary reason for the stagnant forest cover is that increase in forest cover is offset by increase in the forest area is offset by encroachment on forest area by developmental projects and shifting cultivation. So shifting cultivation is very, very significant because if you've seen that Northeast India has the largest of forest cover in India, 80%, 75%, things like that. But Northeast is one region which is steadily declining forest cover. Forest cover is declining steadily in Northeast, like Nagaland, all this area. Because, and one of the most important reason is these were earlier hunter-gatherer tribes, hunter-gatherer peoples, not very heavy, very sophisticated agriculture was not practiced there, but they are now into agriculture big time, and that is shifting agriculture mostly, and also other agriculture practices, which is again reducing the forest cover. There's another problem related to the urbanization needs problem related to meeting of urbanization requirements. In the 1950, about 17% of the population was urbanized, but that stands today at 33% in 2011. From 17% to 55%. And according to UN, by 2050, 55% of Indians would be living in urban areas. Okay, these are some of the issues. Like then there is the issue with respect to the tribal areas, protecting the tribal areas with respect to resource exploitation and industrialization. Similarly, there is the area of industrialization demands. Infrastructure project. That's one of the main. Infra projects issues under. Similarly, climate change related issues with respect to the land cover. So land cover, land utilization. Land utilization and the land utilization pattern of India is going to change, and that's a major concern. Now, there are some principles that should guide principles guiding land utilization policy. There are some principles that guide land utilization policy. So first of all, it talks about the principle. Several principles are there which guide them. Few of them are very common to us. Like first of all, solving human problem. The focus of land utilization policy would be human centric, which is normally expected to solve the developmental aspirations or the other problems of the human society. Then hand in hand with meeting the human issues or the demand of development, you need to ensure sustainability also. So you have the issue of sustainability of or the principle of sustainability of land, ensuring sustainability of land use, optimization of land use. Then the role of state should play an active role in regulating the land use situation, and it also puts in place, it also advocates land use. One of the principles is that there should be a proper land use policy as to what kind of land can be diverted to what kind of activities. It should not be done on an ad hoc basis. Like maybe if you have a development project, you take a lot of some land from this part. Then if you have another one, you take some land from this one. So even when you have barren land available, you go for fertile land. So that is not acceptable. The country needs, or the principles requires that there is a standard land use policy be there, and there should be clarity as to what kind of land can be diverted, what kind of land needs to be protected. That should be there. So just write a few points on the principle of guiding land use, principles guiding land use. First one, human centric. Human beings are at the center for concerns of development. Humans are at the center of the concern for development, and any land use policy should give humans the center place. Okay, so questions would there are few chances like principles being asked because resource management principle decentralized planning in the principle. So principles can always be asked, but even if it is not asked, the utility is that when we are asked to give way forward, there is a skill of giving a balanced, diverse way forwards solutions. That can only be achieved if you if you know the principles behind each of these. For example, principles of conservation, conservation area conserve. So can easily give a comprehensive solution. Okay, so that's why we are dealing with principles. That any land use policy should give human center place. Thus, the primary aim of land use policy should be to solve human problems, like the demand of inclusive growth, reducing inequality, poverty eradication, etc. So if you look at it, it is very logical, because when you have high inequality, high rates of poverty, you will depend upon land for your sustenance. You will use more firewoods. You will cut down trees for firewood. You will go to shifting cultivation because you do not have much of fertilizer to use. So you go for slash and burn. When you don't have resources, you will pollute the environment. You will pollute the land. So the meeting the human demands is necessary. If you are not meeting the human demand, in search of human demand, you will destroy the planet more seriously than if you are providing. So you need to provide that, but not blindly. That's our second point. Developmental activities must be planned. So human need meet ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടി എന്തും ചെയ്യാന്നുള്ളതല്ല. Developmental activities must be planned in a sustainable manner, so as to ensure intergenerational equity. So അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ പറയുന്നത് ഫോറസ്റ്റ് കവർ. നമുക്ക് നെറ്റ് സോൺ ഏരിയ ആവശ്യമാണ്, പക്ഷെ ഫോറസ്റ്റ് കവർ നശിപ്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് പറ്റത്തില്ല, വെറ്റ്ലാൻഡ് നശിപ്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് പറ്റാം. വെറ്റ്ലാൻഡ് കൺസർവേഷൻ ഇസ് ദ മോസ്റ്റ് striking point. Whenever you are meeting human demands for transportation, for habitats, for houses, by compromising on wetlands, you have Kerala, the floods happening. You have the other issues like declining water table, all these things happening. So keep that in mind. Now, sustainability can only be ensured by long-term planning. Long-term planning for optimum utilization of land. Next point, long-term planning for optimum utilization of land. Principle is that long-term planning for optimum utilization of land and saving scarce land resources. And also mitigating the harmful impact of land. So an effective land use policy must strive to reduce the harmful impact on land and optimize the land utilization. The fourth one, states are custodian of land. States are custodian of land, and it is the responsibility of the state. And it is the responsibility of the state government to eliminate the unsustainable pattern of land use by providing necessary legal and institutional support for land use planning. Always talk about the laws when you are giving solutions, when you are giving way forward. Talk about different acts that can be used to ensure sustainable land use policies. Okay, so അത്രയും points നമുക്ക് എഴുതാം in regulating or as the principles of land use, what you call as efficient land use policies. Now, this can be asked in several perspectives with respect to agricultural and land use policy in India, with respect to developmental aspirations, that is industrialization or construction or non-agricultural land use, and maintaining the land use policy in India, with respect to the conservation areas and land use policy in India. So questions can be there. Anytime the question is asked, you can basically utilize the principles that is there, and the principles can be utilized. And if at all solution is asked about, you can talk about few things. I'll explain that later. You can talk about land use policy. Land use zonation can be there. Each land can be classified and zoned into different categories, and it should be clear that which kind of land zones can be utilized for which purpose. There should be not be much of discretion, but rather objectivity. There should be the increase in protected areas, regulated areas, reserved areas should be increased. Forest, thus you can improve the forest cover. Similarly, you can also go for watershed development, watershed management. You can say when you are going for agriculture, you cultivate the most suited agriculture, not rice in the deserts of Rajasthan or in the arid regions of Punjab. There you can grow crops, dryland crops, which are suited, maybe wheat, because there is winter rainfall. Maybe you can go for ragi. Maybe you can go for pulses, which requires very less and less amount of rainfall or irrigation, not rice. Okay, so those kind of points can be kept. Land use, watershed management is one such thing. Biomass management, fertilizer, no overuse of fertilizer. that degrades the land. So such measures needed to be included when you go for land use planning. So രണ്ട് ടോപ്പിക്കാണ് നമ്മൾ കണ്ടത്. I think we would stop here because the next topic is water resources. I'll need a 1 hour session for water resources. I'll explain that water resources, how it can be used. All the time, please refer to the land use resource management principles and land use principles. Again, land use principles can be utilized for water resources. Once you cover the principles of 2 or 3 segment resources, then it would be easy to follow it up. Okay, so conceptual ആയിട്ടൊന്നും അധികം explain ചെയ്യാനില്ല, മോഡൽസിലൊക്കെ പറയുന്ന പോലെ. So these are a few areas which are factual, which are more of understanding. നോട്ട് പറയാനാണെങ്കിൽ കുറച്ചേ ഉള്ളൂ, but some notes needs to be done. That's why I'm explaining that, dictating that to you. But besides the fact that this goes along with the GS, whatever you are studying in GS, whenever you are studying about maybe a scheme for prevention of land degradation, you can write that down. Okay, so land degradation neutrality, economics in the bond challenge, these things can be written. I will write a few things more. I just thought of desertification. Just write a few points on desertification. That comes under land use. One of the problems faced by India with respect to what you call as land degradation is desertification. So mostly about it is said that 30% of Indian land is under desertification. Mostly the regions, the arid regions, of Punjab, Haryana, the western UP part. These are the regions mostly undergoing what you call as land desertification. Similarly, the interior peninsula. So something common is that these are all areas of low rainfall. Similarly, one property here is that they are the green revolution belt. Green revolution has been a resource intensive cropping pattern where more and more what you call as fertilizer and pesticides have been used. 40 irrigation techniques have been used. So that has led to what? Degradation of these lands. So desertification. Now, what is desertification? Right? Desertification is a process of conversion of desertification is a simple definition. This process of the degradation of arable land into desert-like conditions into non-arable desert-like conditions characterized by extreme environmental conditions such as scarcity of water, long periods of drought, heat waves, which further leads to poverty, famine, and conflicts. Okay.
So
Now,
poverty,
famine, conflicts. Human aspect.
headset off ആയിട്ടുണ്ട്, മാറ്റി വെച്ചോ.
Headset off ആയിട്ടോ.
Yeah, headset off. Yeah, but go.
കേൾക്കാൻ
ഇത് കേൾക്കാവോ?
കേൾക്കാൻ പറ്റും, കുഴപ്പമില്ല.
Okay. Yeah, so famine, poverty, famine, conflict. We should again, I mean, in fact, if I'm not dictating, I'm just saying, it should again lead to more and more land degradation and desertification. So that's example. You can always take the example of Chad, the Chad region of Africa, the Sahel region of Africa, where land degradation has led to actually water stress, the contraction of the Chad River, which has led to water stress, which has led to failing agriculture, which has then led to conflicts. All the kind of the terrorist activities, the things are mostly the people are there is no employment there, so they will be like given gun, and terrorism as like militia as employment opportunities. So then that will lead to the more and more conflicts and social decadent social conditions, right? So if you are looking at the impact, it will be having all kind of impacts of desertification. So I'm just giving a round perspective on the issue of desertification here. You'll be having ecological issues. What all issues would be there? So I had to give the reasons for desertifications. Okay. So news page, desertification reason. One of the major reasons for desertification is faulty agricultural practices. See, the areas like Punjab, semi-arid regions, they are semi-arid regions for a reason. They are semi-arid regions, and they have been semi-arid regions for a while. But it is when you have these faulty agricultural practices that is happening, that is what leading to the degradation of semi-arid landforms into arid landforms. So faulty agricultural practice is one such reason. Similarly, you can have urbanization, facade, and unplanned urbanization. Another very important factor is overgrazing. Okay, so grasslands which are covered by grass, these grass are protecting sheep for that particular region. When that grass is removed, you will have soil erosion. So overgrazing will lead to soil erosion. Otherwise, also soil erosion would be there. Overgrazing particularly leads to soil erosion because our grasses are there to bind the soil together. When that binding is removed, and when a rain is happening, when whatever period the rain is there, when that rain happens, the entire soil will be washed off. The topsoil will be washed off, which is known as soil erosion, will lead to what? Declining fertility. And then declining fertility means no more grasses. And then the soil would become what? Like barren lands, wasteland, barred land topography, things like that. And obviously, climate change can be mentioned as the reasons. Climate change results in the form of what changed rainfall regimes, which is again acting as a reason. So desertification has a huge number of impact. Now, as far as impact is concerned, ecological issues, soil erosion continues. The issue is that soil erosion will lead to desertification. Desertification, in fact, lead to more soil erosion. The vegetational cover has been removed. Okay, destruction of vegetation, of natural vegetation. Disaster vulnerability. It will be vulnerable to resources of all kinds, natural resources, disasters specifically. Okay, it will lead to water pollution. Okay, now similarly, you can look into socio-economic issues. What poverty, hazards, and disasters will lead to poverty. Similarly, you can look into unemployment, which will lead to conflicts. Okay, so economic impact, social impacts, huge impact of what money needs to be spent. You can look into what political impact, instability. Similarly, what do you call as regime changes, violent clashes, international order declines, right? Similarly, one more point I can add is that reasons you can always add mining or resource exploitation. So mining has mostly mining. After mining, the land is just left like that. Either there would be water contamination would be happening, or there would be spread of sand and everything from that mined area. Yeah. Yeah, fine. Yeah, so these are some of the reasons. You can obviously find more reasons. I would say land desertification. Desertification is a subcategory on land degradation. So you can look into it in a slight short manner. That would be there. That would be enough. So tomorrow we'll see about how groundwater, the water depletion is there, and how water depletion is, in fact, a major issue. So land and water is the two major issues at our hand here. We'll take 1 hour for that, and we'll take 1 hour for whatever small topics that is left there, the vegetation part, and the energy crisis. Energy crisis, we almost we have dealt with. We'll look into it if some portions are there remaining. And that would be it. Like water, we'll see groundwater and surface water. We'll see the water crisis that is unfurling in front of our eyes. So that would be resources, energy. So anything you might want to add, or any doubts that you have? But I'll get you a couple of materials also, like which I have, compiled all things. I'll just have to compile it now. So I'll be able to do that only after the classes. So I'll send that. So you'll get that ready-made content there. You can refer to it. There is no need to discuss those things in the class. Just faculty. Anything you might want to say?
Sir, impact ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല അതൊന്ന് കാണിക്കാമോ?
Impact. But now I'm seeing one impact. That could be hundreds of impacts. One is soil erosion. Ecological issue. You can look into different aspects of the ecology. Okay, that's what you can do. See how to bring about the answer here. So ecological issue means what? You have to look into different realms of the ecology. First, you look into land. Obviously, when you look into land, you see that land erosion is happening. Landslides are happening. If it's a plain region, you will be having land erosion only. But if you are looking at a Himalayan region or something like that, where desertification is happening, you will see land erosion and landslides are happening. Now you can do water. When you look into water, you will get that there is water pollution happening. Okay, land erosion, land degradation, faulty agricultural practice. Eutrophication, water lake. There would be the groundwater pollution would be happening because of leaching of several minerals. So that would be there. If you look into atmosphere, you will be mostly atmosphere is not closely related, but you can talk about global warming, because land degradation would lead to what? Destruction of vegetation. Destruction of vegetation would lead to reduction in the carbon sink. Again, global warming increases. So acidification is closely linked to global warming. Then you can look into the should have come earlier, the biosphere. In the biosphere, you can look into what? Destruction of vegetation. Destruction of vegetation will lead to what? Destruction of food chain. Destruction of food chain will lead to what? Destruction of biodiversity in the form of animals, fauna. Both flora and fauna will be disturbed. And then that would mean what? The ecosystem services. All the services provided by these natural systems would be degraded. Okay, degradation of ecosystem services. That's again another point. So you have enough number of ecology related points. Now, after that, you come to the socio-economic point. So humans to live, you need the environment. So ecosystem services have been destroyed. That means you will have food scarcity, water scarcity, You will have industrial development affected. Without all these resources, industrial development cannot be. Resource base will be, raw material would be curtailed. Economic depression would be happening. Economic depression happening, which would lead to what? Poverty. Poverty would lead to what? Famines. Famine will lead to what? Social conflict between different groups. Social conflict will lead to what? Political instability. Political instability will lead to what? Global conflicts. So it's like you can continue from one point to the last point. And obviously you can remember a few good examples. Few good examples being the Sahel region, especially the Chad Lake, the the region of Chad Lake would be a better example. If you are looking for good examples, you can look into the Great Green Wall that is being cultivated in the Sahel region again. So Sahelന്റെ താഴെ കൂടെ ഒരു tree line build ചെയ്യാണ്. It's called as Great Green Wall to prevent the desertification, from Sahara to prevent the Sahara from spreading into the Sahel region. So Great Wall is there. India is also building a Great Green Wall that is along the Aravalli Belt to prevent Rajasthan desert from spreading. Similarly, you can use the Bond Challenge. Then I was also searching for a name. A Kubiki model. Kubiki model can be used. Just Google it, you will get the detail. Kubiki model is used in the Manchurian plains of China, where they are using again a different type of plantation to prevent the spread of Mongolian desert. Kubiki model. So such good practices can be utilized while writing a case study. So Kubiki model, just on Google and the details of it. Kubiki model in China to prevent desertification through planting of trees. Land reclamation. All right. You'll be good here in this topic. And later on topic, the utilization of the certification. Okay. So we'll meet next day.
അത് ചൈന ഫോറസ്റ്റിലല്ലേ അത്?
എന്തോ
ഫോറസ്റ്റിലല്ലേ ചൈന ഡെസേർട്ട് അല്ലേ ഫോറസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് മാറ്റിയത്?
അതാണ് Kubiki model. That's basically preventive mechanism against desertification. Okay, if they can do that in the desert, obviously we can do that certainly in areas prone to become desert, right? Land reclamation. Okay. So we'll conclude that. Bye. Good night. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good night, everyone.